There is a question that intelligence agencies never ask out loud because the answer is too uncomfortable. How many people does it take to destroy a country's ability to defend itself from the inside? Not soldiers, not missiles, not satellites, people. Ordinary-looking people. People who wake up in Tehran apartments and eat breakfast and check traffic and go to work. People who have Iranian phone numbers and Iranian ID cards and Iranian cousins who have no idea what their relative actually does on Tuesday afternoons. The answer, in this case, was somewhere above 100, and not one of them was Israeli. We meet him in the middle of an ordinary thing. A man, we will call him Dariush, is arguing with a hotel receptionist in Tehran about a room that was booked for 3 nights, but is now only available for 2. He is tired. He is carrying a bag that is heavier than it looks. He is speaking in the clipped, impatient tone of a businessman who has done this exact argument in this exact lobby more times than he can count. The receptionist eventually finds him a room. Dariush takes his key. He thanks the man with just enough warmth to be forgettable. He rides the elevator alone. He sets his bag down. He sits on the edge of the bed, and for approximately 45 seconds he does absolutely nothing. Then he opens his laptop, connects to a VPN layered inside another VPN, and types 11 words into a message thread that, to any casual observer, looks like a logistics scheduling app. The 11 words describe the exact dimensions of a gate he passed this afternoon. The number of guards, their rotation time, whether they checked ID or just waved vehicles through. He closes the laptop. He orders room service. He watches a football match on the room television. He is 3 years into living as someone who does not exist. Here is what most people do not understand about running a spy inside a hostile state. The hardest part is not the tradecraft. It is not the false documents or the dead drops or the counter-surveillance routes. Those can be taught. Those can be rehearsed until they are reflexive. The hardest part is finding the right person to teach in the first place, because the person you recruit is not recruited from a pool of willing volunteers. There is no advertisement. There is no application form. There is a years-long process of identifying someone whose specific combination of access, motivation, and psychological architecture makes them both useful and manageable. And those 3 things very rarely appear together in the same person at the same time. By 2022, Mossad's Somet division, the unit responsible for recruiting and running non-Israeli agents, had a problem that was growing faster than its solutions. Iran had spent 2 decades hardening its most sensitive infrastructure against every form of technical intelligence collection Israel could bring to bear. Satellite imagery could show a building. It could not show what was in the room on the 3rd floor, north side, 2nd door on the left. Electronic intercepts could capture communications. They could not tell you that a particular general had changed his route to work 3 weeks ago and had not yet told anyone why. Only a person physically present could gather that. And getting a person into position, the right person, in the right place, with the right cover, required starting years before any strike was planned. Somet's mandate, expanded significantly under Mossad Director David Barnea, was not to find heroes. It was to find people with grudges, debts, disillusionment, or need. It was to find people who already had a reason to cooperate, and to give them a reason they could live with. Dariush was not found because he was brave. He was found because 8 years earlier, the IRGC's business networks had quietly stripped his family of a freight warehouse in a mid-sized Iranian city. No charges, no process. A series of inspections that found nothing, followed by a licensing suspension, followed by a transfer of the property to a company no one had heard of 6 months prior. His father had said nothing, because saying something would have made it worse. Dariush had left Iran 8 months after that, and had spent the following years in Germany running a modest import business and telling people, when asked about home, that it was complicated. The man who first approached him was not Israeli. He was a German national of Iranian descent, an affable businessman who kept running into Dariush at the same trade conference in Frankfurt 2 years in a row. They had coffee the first year, a long dinner the second. The third time they met, the man asked Dariush a single question that had nothing to do with business. He asked, "Do you think your father ever got over it?" Dariush did not answer immediately, but the fact that he didn't answer immediately was itself the answer. Recruitment, at this level, is not a transaction. It is a slow, careful excavation of a person's existing wound. The IRGC had taken something from Dariush's family that was never returned and never explained. That wound had not healed. It had simply been covered over by time and distance, and the ordinary business of surviving somewhere new. The man from Frankfurt did not ask Dariush to spy. Not that day, not for several months. What he did was something more methodical. He became someone Dariush trusted, someone who knew about the warehouse, someone who understood that Dariush's polite professional exterior was not peace, it was management. By the time any operational conversation began, Dariush had already made the psychological decision. He had already crossed the line in his own mind. The formal moment of recruitment, the conversation where roles and terms were made explicit, was almost a formality. Almost, because there was a condition, and the condition introduced the first risk that would follow Dariush for the next 3 years. He refused to be trained in Israel. He had family still in Iran. If his travel records ever showed a trip to Tel Aviv, if anyone, anywhere, ever connected him to Israel, those family members would face consequences he could not allow himself to think about clearly. His handlers agreed to the condition. Training would happen in Austria, then Cyprus, then a location he would only know as a rented house near water. The agreement seemed clean. It was not. The compromise meant that Dariush's preparation was conducted across multiple sites with multiple instructors, some of whom would never meet each other. His legend, the false identity that would carry him back into Iran, was built in pieces by people working in parallel, and for the first time, coordinating entirely through encrypted systems rather than in person. Legends built at distance are legends with seams. You cannot see the seams until someone else looks closely. The legend itself was layered and, on the surface, airtight. Dariush would re-enter Iran as a logistics consultant for a Dubai-based freight company with established Iranian business ties. The company was real. Its website was real. Its tax filings were real. If an IRGC intelligence officer ran a routine check, and the IRGC runs routine checks, every element would return clean. His cover employer had real employees who had no idea Dariush existed. His business card listed a position that someone else at the company genuinely held under a different name. He had a client list with real clients who had been briefed only that an outside consultant might occasionally contact them for scheduling coordination. He was 34 years old. He spoke Persian, German, and adequate English. He had spent 8 years outside Iran, long enough to have a plausible reason for not being embedded in any particular social circle when he returned. Long enough to answer questions about what he had missed without needing to lie about specifics. He had rehearsed his cover for 6 weeks before the first crossing. On the morning of his re-entry, standing at the border, Dariush later told his handler that what he felt was not fear exactly. It was the particular vertigo of knowing that every fact about yourself that you are about to present is a deliberate construction, and that the other person has no idea they are evaluating a performance. The guard checked his passport, looked at his face, looked at the passport again, 11 seconds, then waved him through. Dariush walked across the border and into a country he had spent 8 years trying to stop thinking about. And in the pocket of his jacket, alongside his false business cards and his false company phone, was a photograph of his parents that he had been explicitly told not to bring. He had brought it anyway. That was the second unresolved risk, the one his handlers did not know about. Somewhere in Tehran, in a room that was not on any lease that could be traced to any person who could be traced to any organization with a known name, a set of instructions was waiting for Dariush. The instructions told him which facilities to observe, which roads, which schedules. What the instructions did not tell him because those preparing them either did not yet know or had chosen not to include it, was that one facility on his assignment list was located in the same district where his cousin worked, not at the facility, near it. Whether that was an oversight or a test, Dariush would not know for months. And by the time he found out, he would be too deep inside the operation to change direction. So here's the question this story keeps returning to. At what point does a person who has agreed to lie for a reason they believe in discover that the lie has already traveled further than they ever agreed to go? Dariush's first assignment was not dangerous in any obvious way. He was asked to observe, nothing more. Document vehicle patterns near a logistics compound on the western edge of Tehran. Note the timing of deliveries. Note whether the vehicles entering were the same vehicles leaving. Note whether any of them stopped at an intermediate point along the northern access road. He did this 4 times over 6 weeks. He filed reports through the scheduling app. He received no feedback, no confirmation, no acknowledgement that what he was sending was useful or useless or already known. That silence was intentional. Handlers are trained not to respond with affirmation because affirmation creates dependency, and dependency creates behavior change, and behavior change creates pattern, and pattern is what gets an agent caught. But for Dariush, the silence had a different effect. It created space. And in that space, his mind did what minds do when they are under sustained pressure and have no external structure to orient against. It started looking for exits. Not in a dramatic sense. He was not planning to defect or confess or disappear. It was subtler than that. It was the mental habit of a man who has agreed to something and is now, quietly, taking inventory of what the agreement actually costs. The freight company Covert required him to maintain contact with the real employees of the real Dubai firm, occasional emails, an invoice here, a scheduling query there, enough activity to confirm his presence in the system. The employees who received these communications assumed he was a distant contractor they had never met. None of them had been told anything unusual. One of them, a logistics coordinator named Farida, began replying to his emails with a level of detail that suggested she was either genuinely conscientious or had been asked by someone above her to pay attention. He mentioned this to his handler. The response was immediate. Continue as normal. Do not reduce contact frequency. If you reduce contact, it signals awareness. So, Dariush continued. He answered Farida's emails with the correct level of professional warmth. He asked about a shipment delay. She answered. He replied. And in the background of every exchange, he was aware, with a clarity that did not diminish, that he did not know if Farida was simply good at her job or if she was something else entirely. This is the specific psychological texture of deep cover work that no training fully prepares an operative for. It is not one moment of high danger. It is the accumulation of small uncertainties, each individually manageable, that together produce a form of chronic cognitive strain that has no release valve. By month 5 of his second entry into Iran, Dariush had been given a new assignment. This one required closer proximity to a facility than anything he had done before. He needed to be inside a building adjacent to a military compound, not the compound itself, but close enough that his daily presence on that street would become unremarkable. The cover was adjusted. He was now scouting potential warehouse space on behalf of his Dubai firm, which was supposedly exploring an expansion of its Iranian operations. The adjustment required a new document. A letter from the Dubai firm confirming his exploratory mandate, on firm letterhead with a signature from a senior executive. The document arrived via courier in a package that had been routed through 4 countries. It was perfect in every visible detail. What nobody caught, not the document team, not Dariush's handler, not the intermediate coordinator who checked the package, was that the letterhead used a version of the company's logo that had been retired 8 months earlier when the company updated its branding. The current logo had a slightly different font weight on the firm name. A barely perceptible difference. The kind of thing that no ordinary person would notice. The kind of thing that a trained document examiner would notice in under 30 seconds. Dariush did not discover this himself. He discovered it the way people discover most operational errors, through an accidental encounter with someone who knew too much. He was presenting the letter to a property manager near the target area, a routine interaction, the 5th such conversation he had conducted that week. When the property manager's assistant glanced at the document and said, without apparent suspicion, "Your company changed their look recently, didn't they? My brother-in-law's in commercial printing. He did a job for a firm with a similar name. Different logo now, I think." The assistant said it the way people say things that are merely observational. He was not suspicious. He was making conversation. Dariush agreed pleasantly. Said yes, the marketing team had been going back and forth on it. The conversation moved on. The meeting concluded. He left. He walked 4 blocks before he allowed himself to understand what had just happened. The document he was carrying could, under scrutiny from the wrong person at the wrong moment, be identified as outdated. Not definitively false, logos change, older letterhead exists, but inconsistent in a way that would, in the hands of an intelligence officer, become a thread worth pulling. He had 2 choices: report the error and request a new document, which would require a pause in his current assignment, which would itself create a gap in his activity pattern that could look unusual, or continue with the flawed document and absorb the risk. He continued. He did not report the error for 11 days. When he did report it, his handler's reaction was controlled in a way that communicated something Darius had not previously felt in this operation, that the people running him were also managing variables they had not fully told him about. The document error was corrected quickly, too quickly. A replacement arrived within 48 hours through a channel that was different from the original, a contact Darius had not previously interacted with, using a handoff method that his earlier training had not covered. He asked his handler about it directly. In Farsi, on the secure channel, "Who did that come from?" The response, "Don't ask about logistics. Focus on the assignment." That answer, in its specific evasiveness, told Darius something that no explicit statement could have. There were layers to this operation that he was not being shown. People involved in supporting his cover that he had not been introduced to. Possibly other assets working in proximity to him, people he might pass on the street, might encounter in a meeting, might unknowingly share a contact with, who were also operating under covers he knew nothing about. This is standard compartmentalization. It is rational. It exists to prevent any single captured agent from compromising the full network. But for Darius, standing in a Tehran street holding a replacement document from a source he had never been told existed, the rationality of the system and his personal experience of it were pulling in opposite directions. He knew why the compartmentalization was necessary. He did not know, and could not know, whether someone in one of those other compartments had already been compromised. Whether someone, somewhere in the network he was part of but could not see, had already told the IRGC something that made his own position more precarious than he understood. Here is what was not in any of Darius's briefings. 8 months before his second entry into Iran, IRGC Counterintelligence had identified an anomaly in the behavior of a low-level logistics operative. Not Darius, not anyone in his immediate network, who had begun making unusually precise observations near a different facility in a different city. That operative was not immediately arrested. He was watched, and in the process of watching him, the IRGC's technical surveillance team identified a communication pattern. Not the content of the communications, but the pattern, timing, duration, the particular rhythm of a message exchange that suggested coordination rather than coincidence. They did not know what they were looking at, but they knew it was something. They made a decision that counterintelligence services make when they do not yet have enough to act, and they let it run. They continued to watch. They expanded the watch to adjacent anomalies. The IRGC was not reading Darius's messages. They were not tracking his specific movements. But they had identified the existence of a network, its shape, roughly, without its contents, and they had chosen to observe rather than disrupt, because disruption would tell the network it had been seen. And this is the detail that reframes everything that came before it. When Darius felt watched at the dinner with his colleague's brother-in-law, he was not wrong. He was not right either. He was perceiving something real from an entirely incorrect angle. He thought the risk was a single suspicious person in a single room. The actual risk was a system that had been passively watching the edges of his existence for months, without his knowledge, without his handler's knowledge, building a picture that neither side could fully see. And the operative who had first attracted that surveillance, he had since been extracted, quietly, through a channel that his handlers considered clean. He was gone. But the attention he had drawn was not. It had shifted. Slowly. The way surveillance always shifts. Not like a spotlight that follows a person, but like water, finding the next available surface. Darius was not yet the center of that attention. He was adjacent to it. And the distance between adjacent and central, in counterintelligence work, is not measured in geography. It is measured in time. How much of it remains, neither Darius nor his handlers at this point in the operation can honestly say. The activation signal was not dramatic. It was a single message in the scheduling app. A shipment update. 3-line items. Dates, weights, reference numbers. None of it real. All of it a code that Darius had memorized in Cyprus 18 months earlier. In a rented house near water, sitting across from a man who repeated the sequences until Darius could recite them without hesitation in either direction. He read the message at 6:47 in the morning, sitting at a tea house 2 streets from his hotel, with a newspaper he had not been reading open in front of him. He read it twice. Then he folded the newspaper, finished his tea, left a tip that was neither too generous nor too small, and walked back to the hotel at the pace of a man with a full day of unremarkable appointments ahead of him. The activation did not mean immediate action. That was the first thing his training had been insistent about. Activation means readiness. Readiness means review. Review means walking the plan from beginning to end, alone, in a room, the way a surgeon reviews a procedure the night before, not to discover new information but to confirm that what is in your head matches what is required, and to find, if it exists, the place where they don't. Dariush sat in his room for 2 hours. He found a place where they didn't. The timing of his first observation task, a specific access road near the western compound, which he had now visited 14 times over 7 months, required him to be in position by 9 in the evening on the 3rd day after activation. He had always approached that road from the south, using a route that passed a small commercial market. The market, he had noticed 2 weeks earlier, was now closed, permanently. The shuttered stalls and the handwritten sign on the gate had been there long enough that he had registered it, and then filed it away as irrelevant. It was not irrelevant. His cover for being on that road at 9 in the evening, on the 3 previous occasions he had needed to be there after dark, had been a receipt from that market. A man carrying a bag of purchases from a neighborhood market, walking home at a reasonable hour. The market was gone. The receipt he had prepared for this evening was dated 2 weeks earlier. If he was stopped, not by intelligence officers, by a routine patrol, by anyone, and asked why he was in that area, and he produced a receipt from a market that was visibly, demonstrably closed, the cover did not hold. Not catastrophically, not immediately, but it would create a question. And questions in this context do not stay small. He needed to report the problem and request guidance. That was the correct procedure. He opened the app. He began composing a message. He stopped. The message would delay his first task. Delaying his first task would shift the timing of everything downstream. And this operation, he understood without being told the full architecture, was not built for individual components to run late. There were other people, other assets, other elements of the network he could not see, whose actions were timed against his. If he was late, something else would be off. Something he had no visibility into. I sat with this for longer than he should have, 20 minutes. Then he made a decision that was neither correct nor entirely wrong, but that would cost him in a way he did not anticipate. He did not report the problem. He modified the cover on his own. He would not use the market receipt. He would not use a cover that required explanation. He would approach the road from the north instead of the south, using a route that passed a residential block rather than a commercial one, and he would be carrying nothing except his phone and his hotel keycard. A man who had stepped out for air, nothing more. He told himself the adjustment was clean. He told himself it was the kind of field modification that experienced operatives make routinely. What he did not tell himself, because he was not yet willing to, was that he had just deviated from a plan that other people were counting on him to execute exactly. And that the deviation, however small, was now a variable that existed only in his head. The first 2 nights passed without incident. He made his observations. He filed his reports. He walked the streets of a city that was technically his own, and that felt, after nearly 3 years of intermittent re-entry, like a landscape he was always translating rather than simply reading. On the 3rd evening, something went wrong in a way that was so ordinary it was almost insulting. He was 40 minutes from his observation position when his phone, his cover phone, registered to his legend, received a call from a number he recognized. His colleague from the freight firm. The real one. Hamid. A man he had met 4 times in person at industry events over the past 2 years, who believed Dariush was exactly what his legend said he was, and who had been calling occasionally to discuss a joint contract opportunity that Dariush had been carefully stringing along for 6 months. The timing was terrible. The call was innocent. Those 2 facts existed simultaneously and without resolution. He could not ignore it. A man who does not answer his phone from a known professional contact at 7 in the evening, when he is supposedly in the city where that contact also operates, is a man who will be called again. Who will need to explain why he didn't answer. Who will create a small unnecessary thread of irregularity in a record that needs no additional threads. He answered. Hamid wanted to meet. Not now, not tonight, tomorrow morning, breakfast, a place near the business district they both knew. He had paperwork he wanted Dariush to look at. He sounded relaxed, collegial. Dariush said yes. He gave a time. He said he was looking forward to it. He hung up and stood completely still on a side street in Tehran for approximately 30 seconds. Then he continued walking toward his position, arrived on time, completed the observation, filed the report, and returned to the hotel. The breakfast meeting was a problem he would deal with tomorrow. He had learned, in 3 years, that the only way to carry multiple problems simultaneously was to refuse to let them occupy the same mental space. You seal one, you open the other. You do not let them touch, because when operational problems touch each other, they compound. He met Hamid for breakfast. It lasted 90 minutes. The contract paperwork was genuine, moderately complex, and required Dariush to give detailed feedback on freight routing options he knew well from his Covert training. He gave the feedback. He drank 2 cups of tea. He made a joke about a shared acquaintance in Dubai that Hamid found genuinely funny. When they parted on the pavement outside, Hamid shook his hand warmly and said, "You should come meet the team properly sometime. Everyone's heard of you, but nobody's actually seen you." Dariush smiled and said he would. He walked to the corner, turned, and felt something that took him a moment to identify. It was relief. Uncomplicated, physical relief. The breakfast had gone well. Hamid suspected nothing. The cover had held, not just technically but socially, in the texture of a real human interaction, the kind that no legend rehearsal can fully simulate. For approximately 4 hours after that meeting, Dariush felt, for the first time in months, that he was managing this. That feeling was the most dangerous thing that happened to him during the execution phase. Because in the hours when Dariush was having breakfast with Hamid, relaxed, performing well, feeling the particular confidence of a cover that had just passed a genuine test, a separate thread of the operation was running into serious difficulty in another part of the city. An infrastructure operative tasked with activating a pre-positioned system near a northern district compound had arrived at his storage location to find that access had been partially blocked by unrelated construction work that had begun 3 days earlier. The route he needed was passable but now overlooked by workers who started early and finished late. He did not abort. He waited, he assessed, he made his own field modification, the way Dariush had made his. Neither knew about the other. That was the design. But both had now introduced independent variables into a plan that had been built on the assumption of coordinated execution. 2 operatives, in different parts of the same city, on the same operational timeline, each carrying a deviation that only they knew about. The plan was still running. Both men were still inside it. But the plan that was running was no longer exactly the plan that had been designed. It was something slightly different, close enough that nothing had visibly broken, far enough from the original that if something downstream failed, the cause would be very difficult to trace. On the final evening before the main window opened, Dariush completed his last pre-strike observation. He was on schedule. His reports had been filed. His position was exactly where it needed to be. He returned to his hotel and found a message in the app. Not activation, not an instruction. A single line that read, "Confirm position and hold." Hold. He had not been briefed on a hold scenario. Hold was not in the sequence he had memorized in Cyprus. Hold meant the timeline had changed, or something upstream had changed, or someone somewhere in the architecture he couldn't see had encountered something that required the entire sequence to pause. He confirmed his position. He held. He sat in the room for 4 hours without being told why. And in those 4 hours, with nothing to do but wait in a city that was and was not his, carrying a life that was and was not his. Inside an operation he could only see one small piece of. Dariush did something that his training had specifically and repeatedly told him never to do during an active operational window. He thought about his cousin, the one who worked near the facility on his assignment list. He thought about whether his cousin was working the night shift this week, whether he would be in the building he was always in, whether the specific intelligence Dariush had filed about that specific road, those specific timings, those specific rotations, whether any of it had made its way into a targeting calculation that included a radius his cousin might be standing inside. He did not know. He had no way of knowing. He had never been asked whether this concerned him. He had never been given the chance to say that it did. The hold lasted 6 hours, not 4. When the release came, another line in the app. Reference numbers that meant proceed, Dariush moved. He did what he had been positioned to do. He filed his final observation. He confirmed the last rotation pattern. He sent a sequence that, in the logistics app's language, meant shipment ready for dispatch. Then he packed one bag, left the second in the room as instructed, and walked out of the hotel at a time designed to match the natural flow of early morning checkout traffic. He did not run. Running is how people get stopped. He walked to a taxi stand 4 streets away, took a cab to a bus terminal, took a bus to a secondary city, and from there followed a route that had been pre-planned 18 months earlier, and that he had memorized so thoroughly he could have walked it half asleep. At the border, a different guard this time, younger. He looked at Dariush's passport for 9 seconds, waved him through. He was in a third country by early afternoon. That evening, in a debriefing room that smelled like every other debriefing room. Recycled air, instant coffee, the particular silence of a space designed to produce candid conversation. He was told that the operation had achieved its primary objectives. He nodded. He was not told which specific elements of his reporting had contributed to which specific outcomes. That information was not shared with field operatives as a rule. He understood the rule, he had always understood it, but understanding a rule and being at peace with what the rule withholds are different things. He asked once, directly, "Was anyone in the vicinity of the northern compound during the strike window?" The handler paused for a fraction of a second too long before answering, then said, "The strikes were targeted. Civilian presence in the area was assessed." That was not an answer to the question Dariush had asked. He did not ask again. The fallout inside Iran began before the operation was fully concluded. Within hours of the first strikes, the IRGC's intelligence directorate activated a sweeping internal security protocol that had been pre-prepared, which itself indicated that the IRGC had not been entirely surprised, that some portion of their pre-observation of the network had given them enough forewarning to prepare a response, even if not enough to prevent the strikes themselves. Thousands of people were questioned in the days that followed. The criteria for questioning were, in practice, proximity and pattern. People who lived near affected areas. People who had traveled internationally in the previous 18 months. People whose professional profiles involved logistics, freight, or construction, the exact sectors that Mossad's cover architecture had deliberately used. This was the structural cost of the cover design that nobody had fully priced in advance. By choosing business covers that were realistic and therefore common, the operation had, in its aftermath, pointed suspicion at an entire class of ordinary Iranian professionals who had nothing to do with any of it. The cover that protected the agents during the operation became, after the operation, a template for who the IRGC would pursue. The document error, the outdated letterhead that Dariush had continued to carry for 11 days before reporting it, resurfaced in a way no one had anticipated. The property manager's assistant, the one who had mentioned the logo change in passing, was questioned as part of the broad sweep. He remembered the meeting. He mentioned the document. He mentioned the logo discrepancy, not as accusation, simply as a detail he recalled because his brother-in-law worked in commercial printing. The detail was logged. It was cross-referenced against other reports from the same district. It connected to nothing concrete. But it sat in an IRGC file. A thread attached to a description of a man who matched Dariush's legend closely enough to be useful. The legend was gone. Dariush was gone. But the thread existed. It meant that the freight company in Dubai, the real company, with real employees including Farida and Hamid, became subjects of interest to Iranian intelligence. Not serious interest, not immediate danger, but enough that their Iranian business activities became monitored, their communications flagged, their contacts reviewed. People who had done nothing except employ a name that Mossad had borrowed were now carrying a residue they had no knowledge of and no ability to remove. Hamid, who had shaken Dariush's hand on a pavement and said everyone had heard of him but nobody had actually seen him, would spend the next year watching his Iranian contracts quietly evaporate without ever being told why. The strikes achieved what they were designed to achieve militarily. That is on the record. What is also on the record, though discussed in quieter rooms, is that the operation's scale, the number of assets deployed, the depth of the infrastructure, the length of the preparation period, left a footprint that cannot be fully erased. Networks of this size do not disappear cleanly. They leave residue, former contacts who remember meetings, safe houses that were used and vacated but still exist as physical spaces that someone, eventually, connects to something. Document trails that were designed to dissolve but that dissolve unevenly, leaving fragments in filing systems and property records and the memories of people like the property manager's assistant. Iran's intelligence services, in the months following the strikes, conducted what independent analysts described as the most systematic counterintelligence purge in the Islamic Republic's history. Most of those arrested were not Mossad assets. Most were people who matched a profile: the trader, the logistics consultant, the engineer with foreign ties that the operation had made suspicious by association. That is a consequence that does not appear in any targeting assessment. It is not a metric that intelligence agencies formally track, but it is real, and it falls on people who are not in the equation. The double agents, the assets who had been observed and allowed to run by IRGC Counterintelligence, were handled differently depending on what they knew and what they had delivered. Some were quietly arrested in a way designed not to signal to Israel that they had been identified. Preserving the IRGC's ability to claim the intelligence picture had been controlled. Some were left in place, their value now reversed, not as sources of Israeli intelligence but as channels for Iranian disinformation going forward. The ones who had genuinely served both sides, who had sent real intelligence in both directions believing they were managing competing interests, faced the specific punishment reserved for people who are trusted by no one. They were useful to neither side and dangerous to both. Their outcomes are not publicly documented. Dariush was resettled under a third identity in a mid-sized European city. The process of resettlement is designed to be practical: housing, documentation, a financial foundation. The agencies involved are efficient at the practical elements. They have done this before. What they are less equipped to address is what happens to a person who has spent 3 years answering to a name that was not his, in a country that was and was not his, building relationships, real ones, textured and specific, with people who believed in a person who did not exist. The tradecraft term for what Dariush developed is legend fatigue. The clinical literature describes it as a dissociative condition in which the boundary between the operative's authentic identity and their cover identity has been eroded through sustained immersion. It is not dramatic. It does not look like anything from the outside. It looks like a man who pauses before signing his name, who answers to the wrong name in a crowded room and then recovers quickly enough that no one notices, who checks the entrance to every restaurant before choosing where to sit, who cannot fully explain to anyone around him, not a doctor, not a neighbor, not anyone, why certain questions make him go somewhere quiet for a moment before answering. He cannot talk about where he has been, he cannot explain what he did. The people who know what he did are not people he has ongoing access to, and would not discuss it if he did. He knows that the operation achieved its objectives. He was told this in a room that smelled like recycled air. He has no reason to disbelieve it. He does not know whether his cousin was on shift that night. He has looked for information about it in the ways available to him, cautiously, indirectly, and has found nothing conclusive in either direction. That is not resolution. That is the particular open wound of a person who chose to act and cannot access the full consequences of his own actions. The agencies that ran this operation will learn from it. They will adjust their legend-building protocols. They will review the compartmentalization gaps that allowed 2 independent field modifications to run simultaneously without coordination. They will build the next version of this capability more carefully. That is what institutions do. They extract the lesson and move forward. What they do not do, what they are not structured to do, is sit with the cost the way the people who paid it have to. Dariush pays it every morning, in a city whose name he was given rather than chose, living as a person whose history began the day his resettlement paperwork was processed. Everything before that is classified, including him. If you think intelligence operations are won only by the people giving orders from safe rooms, this story is the counter-argument. The real architecture of what happened in 2026 was built not in command centers, but in hotel rooms and tea houses and border crossings by people whose names will never be declassified, who made decisions in the field that nobody briefed them on, carrying costs that no after-action report will ever fully account for. That is the part of the history that disappears first.